Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at Case. And it's great to be with you again. I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you because today you'll be hearing my conversation I had with Dr. Kedian from UMass. You'll hear in the conversation that UMass is the state medical school for the state of Massachusetts, obviously. But I hope you don't stop right now and leave because like you don't live in Massachusetts or you think you won't be applying here because you're from out of state. But I encourage you to stick with me because I've found that in these conversations, we uncover a lot of really helpful advice. Like think about the one that I had, the conversation I had with the dean at University of Texas, San Antonio, another similar state school that takes a lot of residents from that particular state. However, I find that we uncover a wealth of really helpful advice for pre-meds as we go through these conversations. So this one with Dr. Kedian is no exception. So let me begin by giving you some background on the medical school. Located about 50 minutes west of Boston in Worcester, Massachusetts, the University of Massachusetts Chan Medical School is a public medical school. It was founded in 1962. UMass Chan's mission is to provide the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with the highest quality physicians with a focus on primary care. The school's main teaching hospital is UMass Memorial Healthcare, which is the largest healthcare provider in central Massachusetts. The school is approximately 1,200 medical students, residents, and fellows in over 30 specialties and is committed to training physicians who will provide exceptional healthcare to the underserved populations. The mission of UMass Chan is to advance the health and well-being of the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the world by leading and innovating in education, research, healthcare delivery, and public service. The school is dedicated to improving healthcare through innovative research and translating discoveries into new therapies and treatments for patients. UMass Chan offers a contemporary and innovative curriculum called VISTA. It's designed to promote curiosity and inquiry, and the VISTA curriculum uses almost entirely group and problem-based learning with an extensive use of medical simulation. VISTA's teaching methods reflect the world we live in with an emphasis on equity, inclusion, and wellness. UMass Chan has a combined MD-PhD program as well as opportunities for MBA, MPH, and Masters of Science in Clinical Investigation after matriculation. Unique offerings include 2 tracks with our original campuses, which we'll talk a little bit about, and the population-based urban and rural community health track is based at Baystate Health Systems in Western Mass. It provides an exceptionally strong education and health disparities, as well as public and community health. The brand new LEAD Lahey track is based in Burlington, Mass, and has a concentration in leadership skills and health system science for the next generation of medical leadership. Each track admits about 25 students per year. So, UMass Chan admits approximately 70% of its class from Massachusetts and is among the most affordable medical schools in the country. That's important. They only accept international applications from Canadian citizens. DACA recipients, refugees, asylees, and green card holders are all eligible for acceptance too. This year, they received over 5,000 applications and will interview approximately 900 for a class of 225. There you go. There's a little background on them. And now let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Dr. Tracy Kedian is a family physician and the Associate Dean of Admissions at the UMass Chan Medical School. She earned a Bachelor of Science from McGill University in Montreal and returned to Massachusetts for medical school and residency training. She's been a physician educator for her entire career with leadership roles in both undergraduate medical education and at the UMass Worcester Family Medicine Residency Program, where she served as Education Director and the Associate Program Director for Maternal Child Health. Dr. Kedian gained experience in working with the struggling medical learner and assessment in medical education and became the director of the UMass Center for Academic Achievement department where she made strides in academic support services and learner progression. In 2022, she was appointed the Associate Dean of Admissions at UMass Chan with a mission to provide equity and inclusion in the admissions process and achieve the admission of a more diverse student body. Dr. Kedian has been a primary care physician in the inner city of Worcester at an FQHC, federally qualified healthcare center, since 2001, where she delivers care throughout the spectrum with a focus on low English proficiency and maternity care. Upon assuming the leadership position at UMass Chan Admissions, she has stepped back from primary care and now provides inpatient obstetric care to a vulnerable population at UMass Memorial Healthcare. So she's very busy. So I was very grateful to get some of her time to talk with you and to bring you this conversation today about UMass. So hey, let's just dive right into it, Dr. Kedian. I hope you enjoy. Hey, Dr. Kedian, thank you so much for joining me today. I really am grateful to have you here.
It is such a pleasure. I'm really pleased to have been invited. Please call me Tracy.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate that. Hey, well, listen, we have a lot to cover here. There's a lot of exciting things happening at your school recently, a lot of changes and great things going on. So before we get to that, though, I want to ask a couple things of you, some personal things. Well, first of all, I want to get out of the way how you pronounce Worcester, because it's not spelled like it sounds. It's Worcester.
It's a toughie because there is a Worcester in England, and I think they say Worcester. And we, with our Massachusetts accent being, by far the most beautiful across the country, we say Worcester.
Worcester.
Kind of like Wistah. But
okay,
it's
so if you really want to
Worcester.
sound like you're like from, the area, say Worcester.
Worcester, yeah.
Worcester. Okay, because in Ohio, about an hour south of us and in Cleveland, we have a Worcester, Wooster, a small college town. So this throws people up, but it's Worcester.
Yeah, I think it's designed to be the first challenge when you come to the area.
Like like if you say it right, you're a local. All right. So you've been in Worcester for quite a while.
I've been here since I graduated from college. Yeah, I did my undergraduate in Montreal, which was an amazing experience. And then I came without a gap year to UMass Medical School, as it was called then. And so I've really been here since 1992.
Yeah. Wow. So what's, you've lived there a long time now. What are some of your favorite things to do around town?
Well, Worcester, as we say, is an incredible city for some reasons. We are remarkably diverse for such a small city. We have a refugee relocation program, and that in combination with our own natural roots has created a city where there are over 90 languages spoken in our public school system.
Wow.
And so Worcester is sort of a series of neighborhood connected to neighborhood connected to neighborhood. And each time there's a turn in the road, you're going to see signage in different languages and different food. So we have really fantastic restaurants. You can go to anything from Puerto Rican to Vietnamese to Somali to Albanian. And restaurants are usually small and they're usually run by families. So they're very authentic and they're very welcoming. Worcester is going through a real growth in terms of its nightlife and its social opportunities. And there's great places to just hang out downtown and shop and have fun. And we just got our own minor league baseball team. So we're really excited about that. It's right downtown. Yeah. So there's a lot that's really fun about living around here.
Yeah. And then in late summer, you host the Summer Little League World Series.
Yes. Yeah. My kids are particularly excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I always watch a little bit of it on ESPN every year. So, all right, cool stuff going on. What are some things that, what's something that people surprised to learn about you?
Well, it's probably an artifact from having worked in an inner city community health center for over 20 years, but I speak 4 languages. Oh, wow. Studying language was always sort of my favorite part of high school. And I lived in Montreal, so we spoke a lot of French. And as I came to Worcester, there are every room that you go into to see a patient is a different language, a different language, a different language. So I've really enjoyed that. And I've learned 2 new languages since I got here.
And so you have English down, French, and
Spanish and Portuguese.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. A polyglot. Oh, very cool. Well, I will keep this interview in English, but if you want to move around a little bit, I'll
no English. I'm really strong in English, so I'd love to continue that.
Cool. Well, let's dive into some of those highlights of the school, in particular the curriculum. And the school has kind of unveiled a newer curriculum very recently called VISTA. And so walk us through some of those highlights of this new curriculum and kind of maybe why there was this need for change.
It's a great question. It's super exciting. We've been involved for over 2 years and doing really just a complete blow up and reconstruction of the curriculum. And the old one, I should say our former one, which we called LINK, was still relatively new. It had taken the individual classes, like going from immunology to biochemistry, to making all education really longitudinal and woven together. So you would go from pulmonary to cardiac. And so that was very exciting for students. Our country has been changing a lot recently. And it's not a complete response to social changes, but it's a recognition of how important it is to include social change in medical education, because these are the lives of our patients and we need to be able to relate and to be prepared for them. So we now have a completely integrated curriculum that has over 80% of the time is not in a large group lecture setting. So there are quite a lot of small groups, students working on projects in teams with support and mentorship. There's quite a lot of simulation. We have a sizable simulation center. And so students are going to start practicing simulation from the very first week. Particularly popular is what we call POCUS, point of care ultrasound. And so previously that was something you didn't learn until you were in residency or even after. And now medical students are learning it in their first year. So they're very excited about bringing clinical medicine to life from the first week. There are also, speaking more about social change, there are topics which are important to every area of medicine, such as LGBTQ health, equity and inclusion in medicine, and the social determinants of health. These are among what we call our longitudinal focus topics. And that means every block, every class, every rotation is going to include what are the social determinants of health that are going to impact your patient as you're learning about this particular disease process. So it is exciting in a lot of ways because it's moved away from now we're going to teach you about immunity and T cells to now you're going to learn about HIV as an illness. What are the community impacts? How does poverty affect a person's health when they have HIV? What are the mechanisms of the drugs? How do they work in the body and how to take care of patients? So it's just so much more engaging and exciting from the beginning. When I was a medical student, like first and second year were just something you had to survive. And then you would take that first medical licensing exam and then you could go on to the fun stuff. But now we're starting with the fun stuff early on. Also, a very popular feature for our first years is what we call the WIN week. After each 4 weeks, there is a week which is called your WIN week. And WIN stands for what I need. So you take a test at the beginning of that week because that's your quiz on that block. And so if there was an area that you feel like you need more academic support in, you have the whole week to explore that and quite a lot of resources. If you wanted to spend more time doing simulation, you can do that in our sim center during the WIN week. And also if you just need a break, if you need some mental time away, you can use that WIN week for that. And programmed time for self-care was never a part of medical education before our pandemic and before all the changes we've been going through. So the WIN week is extremely popular. And the 3 pillars of the curriculum, I'll just finish with this, are the foundational sciences, clinical care, and patient and provider wellness. So that is given a huge emphasis at UMass Chan.
I really like that win week. That's a feature I haven't heard from schools, or similar kind of thing from other med schools. It sounds like to me that almost allows for students to personalize their education a little bit. If you can find those things that maybe I need a little bit of extra brushing up on or work on, but during that week, is it kind of self-paced with the resources, or are there certain classes that I would have to attend to get that extra boost?
It is self-paced, and the resources are very much out there from the beginning. So we're trying to encourage what we call in education a growth mindset, but what students can experience as getting to know themselves really well and what they're good at and what they're not good at. And when you're in a pass-fail curriculum where there's just support emotionally and academically and physically all around you, you can now start to lean into the things that are not your strengths, rather than in the olden days where you were sort of trying to not let anybody know that you kind of were bad at this area of biochemistry. There's just much more communication and transparency, and there's no academic or assessment downside to really getting more experience in a certain area.
Yeah, that's cool. So knowing that it's self-paced then also allows you to build in that wellness feature, because then I could kind of tailor my days the way I see fit and work in some extra work if I want to, and then also find some time to go for a walk or,
work on your hobbies.
Yeah,
many of our students are accomplished musicians or writers or cooks, or, they have other areas of their life, which previously we were told you just kind of have to put that on hold until you're done. But you make your son much a healthier and richer person if you're able to hang on to the things that you enjoy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Very cool feature. Yeah, love it. A couple other things I wanted to talk to you about the VISTA curriculum. Well, what's pass-fail the first 2 years? You mentioned that 80% of it is not in a large kind of lecture setting. So is that a combination of like small group learning, team-based learning, problem-based learning? What does that other 80% kind of look like?
They're absolutely all the things that you just said. So many times students are in groups broken down by whatever block they're working on. And they're going to, instead of meeting only with their professor, they're going to have an additional educator sort of assigned to work with them. And you'll have a clinical presentation. You'll have a 10-year-old who comes in after 3 weeks of having a poor appetite and slowly increasing cough, for example. So, this is your first year of medical school. So there's so much that you don't know about what causes you to lose your appetite and get a cough. But some of the reasons that might happen to a patient are part of what you're learning in that block. So that's what you were mentioning when you talked about problem-based learning, a small group with support working together on a problem. And as they get through it, they're going to review pharmacology, and they're going to review community health, and they're going to review anatomy and physiology. And the process of clinical problem solving, which is how we describe how I come up with what I think is going on. We're incorporating that right away. We also have quite a bit of technology learning. So in addition to the simulation I mentioned, we have interactive learning modules. So you'll go online onto the portal that we use at our school, and you'll see that there's several of these ILMs assigned for you. And so you're like, okay, I have half an hour now. You click on one and you start to go through, and it's not just reading text on a page. There's video, there are questions that you have to answer. There's some, I might say, games, strategies of how, you'll have one column and you have to match that with things on the other column. But it's like you get to use your brain and you get to interact with in content on a screen. We do also have some reading, traditional reading. There was a study from a long time ago that we tend to quote in medical education, that you take a typical medical school curriculum and you add up all of the required reading, not even the recommended, just the required. And in order to complete it all, it took more hours than there were in the week. So that meant not going to school, not sleeping, not doing anything else. So there's a real recognition that we can't learn everything we need to learn from reading books, but there are some texts that are pretty classic and very helpful.
Yeah.
So the technology, the small groups, and then the final thing is what we call our early clinical learning curriculum. So this is the same group that you're going to be with throughout your foundational years. And you're going to get projects and topics, and you're with the same faculty person throughout. And it's all focused on clinical learning and patient care.
Wow. Oh, so then that group stays together so that you're always got a little family in a sense.
Yeah,
as
exactly.
you move through. Oh, wow. That kind of leads me to, I wanted to hear more about learning communities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think they're one of the most important features of life at UMass Chan that support students. We have, if just think Hogwarts, multiple learning communities. And so when you matriculate, when you start at the medical school, you're going to be assigned to a learning community and assigned to a mentor. And it's just completely random. Everyone gets an assignment. And there will be about 20 people in your first year class that go to that are assigned to one learning community, for example, Grafton House. All of our learning communities are named after neighborhoods in Worcester.
Oh, neat.
And all of the mentors, these are not sort of volunteer advisors, which has been sort of traditionally the approach. These are highly educated mentors who have weekly faculty development on how to support students who are having academic difficulty, support students who may have mental health issues to try to care for themselves. They know about financial aid. They know all about the curriculum. You did a research project that it was in college that you really enjoyed, and you're wondering if I can do something like that. And this mentor comes to know you very well, and you know them very well. And so by the time your fourth year, you're quite close, and they help you with your future career plans. So that very enriching mentoring, and the learning communities, each kind of like Hogwarts, have their own common room and their own social area. And there's quite a lot of social events outside of the school where there's maybe just a little bit of competition among the learning communities. And there are house points, which can come from volunteer work and academic excellence. And there is a house cup at the end of the year.
Yeah.
We just took that right from J.K. Rowling.
Why not? Why reinvent things? And it seems to bring the community together. You were talking a little bit about space and rooms. From the YouTube video I saw, you just wrapped up a new medical education and research building. Is that correct?
It is getting very close to being wrapped up. It's always difficult to know the exact day, but in just under a year from now, they will start moving the first groups in there. And so it's going to be some of our existing research labs, and there are going to be educational centers, and we're going to have a center for rare diseases, which is interesting to some applicants. Yeah, there's this phenomenon in medicine of a rare disease, meaning like only 5 people in America might have it and 3 in Europe. And so it's very difficult to get treatment because there's not a lot known about it. So having these coordinated centers where institutions can share information is very helpful. And some students find that quite interesting. So we're looking forward to that. We are growing quite a bit. When I was a medical student here, there were 100 students. This year, they're going to start 200.
Wow.
And the following year will be 225. And the chancellor has promised me he's going to stop growing, at least for a little while.
Yeah. I know how that goes. So speaking of size and kind of how you think a lot of changes there are also a couple branch campuses. And there was one branch campus. And then, for people that are listening, we started this conversation of getting together back in January, and it's now middle of April. So, and you're like, hey, can we hang on? There's some new stuff coming down the road, even more new things. And so now here we are, and now you have a second branch campus. So please tell us a little bit more about each one of these opportunities. One is Baystate. Yes. The Baystate campus and so tell us a little bit about these.
Yeah, so these are super, super exciting. Many large medical schools, particularly state medical schools in large states like Minnesota, will have multiple campuses. Right. We have one primary campus in Worcester, where we also have our graduate school of biomedical sciences, where people are like getting PhDs in biochemistry. And we have our graduate school of nursing, so where you go to become a nurse practitioner or get a doctorate. Worcester is an amazing learning experience, but we were growing. We established a regional campus at Baystate Health Systems, which became known as the Perch Track, kind of like the fish, but spelled differently. Population-based urban and rural community health. So if you know that you are going to go into a field of medicine that's going to be closely tied to the community, where you're interested in the science of community health, how to figure out why there's so much asthma in this particular neighborhood, where there also happens to be a factory where many of the members of the community work. It's one thing to just be a physician in the office taking care of people with asthma. It's another thing to understand what some of these social determinants are and how medicine can interact with that to improve health for larger groups. And the science beyond that is very robust and super interesting. So for students who know they have an interest in that, at the time of applying to our medical school, you will select whether you would like to be centered at Worcester or one of the regional campuses. Our other regional campus is starting next year for the first time. So the first students will do their learning there in 2024. It is in the city of Burlington, Mass, which is about 40 minutes from Boston. And it is the Lahey Health Systems. And the name of the track is LEAD at Lahey. This is for students who have an interest in what we call health system science, which is the science of how healthcare is delivered, for better or for worse, in our country, and doing research and work on how it can be improved, and also in growing their own leadership skills. Lahey takes pride in a particularly innovative method of healthcare delivery that is very interprofessional. Many parts of the healthcare team have administrative say in how things are run. And so this is we need to grow a new generation of medical leaders. Everyone knows how much we are struggling right now between the pandemic, population changes, the obesity epidemic is making health much worse. So we're looking for people who plan on taking the lead in there. So that doesn't mean you need to know that you want to be the CEO of a hospital system. But if you are thinking, why don't we do things differently? Why don't we try it this way instead of that way? This is a fantastic opportunity to develop those particular skills and also to make close relationships with community partners. It's not community health per se, but we're a health system and you're a community health center in a neighborhood that we serve. Let's talk about setting up systems that work best to support our patients. Yeah. So there are 25 students each year will go to each of these regional campuses, and the other 175 will stay at Worcester.
So is the class increased to accommodate that new branch campus, the new 25 that are going to be going there? And like you said, this is something that when you get your secondary application, you can indicate if you want to be in that one.
Exactly.
Okay.
On our secondary, in addition to the regular questions that you answer, there's a page where I'm going to select the Perch track, I'm going to select the LEAD at Lahey track, or I'm going to select Worcester campus.
Okay.
And you can only do one.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's a very important, because I know people would say, well, can I preference one, but also fall back on another?
You can preference a regional campus, and we will then ask you if you're not accepted into the LEAD at Lahey program, are you interested in coming to Worcester? And if you click yes, your application will flow through the admissions process like that.
Okay. Hey, a couple of clarification questions. If you're doing the Baystate or the Lahey, you go there for the first year, or do you spend the first 2 years in Worcester and then go to those regional campuses for 3 and 4?
You're going to spend time in both places. Okay. So you are going to be at your regional campus every week, at least once a week. And you will be in Worcester for, I would say, more of the time, a majority of the time, for the first roughly 18 months, which is our foundational curriculum.
Okay.
And then after that, most students will actually move to to Springfield, Massachusetts, which is west of Worcester, where Baystate is, or to Burlington. So because they're really going to spend all of their time at the regional campus.
Wow. All right. That's good to know. So they're getting the benefits of all those things you talked about initially, the technology and the learning communities and everything else that the students that are stationed at Worcester will get. And then they kind of go off from time to time back and forth a little bit to Springfield or Burlington. And then ultimately they're all the time.
And the times that the Perch and Lahey and the LEAD students are at their campuses, the Worcester students will be working on their pathway. So I often get the question, I'm kind of interested in health system science, but I'm not sure I want to go to a regional campus where it's the primary focus. We have, for our Worcester students, 7 focus pathways in areas such as research, health system science, global health, community health, equity. So these students who are at Worcester can still get access to much of the learning and opportunities. They just will not have such intense focus. And you will be in your pathway for 4 years, and you will do some scholarly work. Yeah. It doesn't mean it has to be research. It may be a quality improvement project. But whatever your project, you will need to present it to an audience, which will usually be locally at UMass when you're done.
Now, these pathways I've seen from our school has them, and I know a number of other schools do too. It's a nice way to complement what you're getting on top of your MD curriculum and kind of personalize things for you a little bit and customize and have those little extra areas of concentration to allow you to interact with more people that are kind of like-minded. Because as a medical school class, you're already a group of like-minded people. Yes. These are finally your group. These are people who are here to all nerd out on medicine. And you're not going to know anybody by doing it. And then you can go to your pathways and really focus in more on that niche area.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it gives more of a sense of community, like you're saying, because you're spending time with people who really have the same priorities as you. Yeah. And you still have access to all of the educational opportunities.
You mentioned a little bit ago that some of the affinity groups that you and the activism that is kind of a part of the culture and identity of UMass Chan. Can you talk a little bit about how affinity groups are supported at your school? Absolutely.
We have a very broad range of student organizations, and many of them are newer affinity groups where students can spend their time on issues of social justice or equity, or a particular area of clinical focus that's important to them. It's a great way to get extracurricular opportunities and make connections and even be in more of a group of like-minded people. So we have many affinity groups that are supporting students from diverse backgrounds. We have White Coats for Black Lives and the Student National Medical Association and the Latino National Medical Association, very strong chapters. We have a very robust diversity and inclusion office with many faculty and resources that can support these students. I just came from the SNMA fair, which was in Hartford, Connecticut. I think it was just a week ago. And we had a very large contingent from UMass, and our vice chancellor for diversity was there. And it was a huge conference, and it was amazing. So in addition to that, there are organizations which support different areas of need, I would say, in the medical community. Reproductive health, for example. As you know, Massachusetts is a fairly progressive state politically. So we're not facing any restrictions on access to abortion or access to gender affirming care. So we have LGBTQ plus affinity groups. It's the most prominent one is called QMass, which is fun. And we have Students for Choice that are getting actively involved in our OBGYN department and family medicine department, talking about reproductive access for patients. So I would say that students often choose to come to UMass Chan because of a particular interest in social justice, serving underserved communities, and making a difference in addition to providing high quality care and doing research. And these student groups are a really great opportunity for that.
Yeah, it sounds like a great way to kind of grow those interests and support your community as you're learning and growing as a student there. Great stuff. What about the clinical years a little bit? Do third and fourth year students do their clinical rotations in Worcester, or do they go to other parts of the state, or is it a mixture of both?
Definitely a mixture of both. So our VISTA curriculum is just launched this year. So right now, only our first years are doing VISTA. Second, third, and fourth years are in our previous curriculum, which we called LINK. Mm-hmm. So there will be some changes to the way the clinical years are administered. I would say mostly in terms of really actively including those longitudinal topics. But of course, third and fourth year are mostly about the core clinical experiences, which at UMass Chan are family medicine, psychiatry, and pediatrics, internal medicine, neurology, OBGYN, and general surgery. So all of those are required rotations. We do have a lottery process. If you are at a regional campus, you will do all of your rotations at your regional campus.
Okay.
But if you are at Worcester, you can do them in one of the two major hospital systems in the city. We also have partner campuses further west in Western Mass, also on Cape Cod, in Boston, and north of Boston. We are a large class, and we are a small state, and there are also 3 other medical schools in our state. So finding high quality clinical experiences is a very important priority for us. And so we have partnerships throughout the state.
Yeah, that's great. Just to I want to go back to one thing before we kind of wrap this part up. And that is, you mentioned a little bit ago when we were talking about the Win Week and how there are some components in there just to kind of give students a break. What do the wellness activities or wellness initiatives look like at UMass Chan?
I think they are significantly more improved since over the last maybe 5 years. Yeah. On the hospital side, we have the Office of Wellbeing, which is to support all the doctors and hospital system employees. And on the medical school, we have the Office of Student Life. And we have Assistant Vice Provost for the Office of Student Life. So everything pertaining to all kinds of support of students, with the exception of the academic support, we have another institution for that, are through our Office of Student Life. So I think the fact that it has its own vice provost tells you that it's a big priority. Yeah. But yes, I find that hierarchy confusing a lot myself. UMass Chan is a very closely knit health system, which is called UMass Memorial Healthcare, and medical school, which is called UMass Chan Medical School. So we actually occupy the same building. And so there's quite a lot of overlap between services and administrations for hospital and health system employees and for the medical students. I think it's good for the students because they really get to see the real lives of practicing physicians up very close. Our Office of Student Life takes care of events for students that are designed to promote well-being. And that really seeps into just every area. And I think sort of obvious that our student counseling services have grown and have very easy access to appointments and highly confidential service and their own medical records. So this complete privacy is very important. And it's sort of what we tend to think of when we talk about supporting students, but also he will weigh in on issues of, how many surveys each year do the students have to fill out? What kind of paperwork are they required to do to jump through this and that and the other hoop? How are we supporting them for their medical licensing exams? And how are we providing them with social opportunities to get together and their events through the learning communities? So it's not only the traditional types of support but we think of, but also making life for students easier.
Yeah, well, that's really thoughtful, very thoughtful. It sounds very intentional.
Very, very intentional.
Yeah,
and
very
intentional. The fact that we all work, I in admissions and the Dean of Student Affairs and Student Life and the curriculum all work very closely together so that we can report on how changes are going to impact students at many levels. Yeah. Yeah. You guys are all kind of handing off to each other in certain ways. Yeah. That's tremendous. Together.
Yeah. Couple more questions here, then we'll move into the missions piece. But it sounds like every once in a while you get kind of out and about and shaking hands with prospective applicants. When you're meeting them and you're talking with them about your medical school, what's something that you wish people knew about your school that they may not be aware of, that you'd like to get out there to people?
Oh, that's such a great question. I want people to know that we are their state school. Whenever I speak to a Massachusetts resident, I'm like, we are an institution that was put in place for you with a mission of producing physicians to serve the Commonwealth. And I think that connection with being a public institution, being a nonprofit health system, is really critical to our mission. We do take quite a number of out-of-state students as well, and we have competitive tuition for that. But when they come in, they know that we are here to serve the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that means that translates into whatever the needs are at the time. And so if those needs are equity, if those needs are reproductive justice, if those needs are increasing our research portfolio, that we modify to meet the needs of the state.
Yeah, that's cool. And lastly, so you were a student at one point there at the med school, and it sounds like you're in some of your other roles, you've been closely involved in student activities there. When you're overheard at UMass, what do you hear that students say that they like most about your school?
Support.
Yeah.
It comes across at so many different levels, but I was previously, before I was in admissions, I was the director of our Center for Academic Achievement, which is the academic support organization where we want every student to feel academically successful and to go where they want to go. Students tell me that they feel so supported at UMass Chan, not just academically, not just socially, not just emotionally, but that they feel like they are important. Students have a great deal of input into change. For example, there have been students involved in every level of the curriculum redesign, and they are now the primary source of feedback for us about how things are going. So they feel heard, they feel important, and they feel supported.
What I'm hearing is it sounds like they feel like they belong when they come there. Yeah. And belonging is important. The feeling of belonging is really important. Yeah. Oh, that's really nice. All right. To switch gears a little bit, you've kind of whet the appetite of listeners about all these wonderful and these really exciting changes taking place there. So let's roll up our sleeves and get into the admissions piece a little bit. So, boy, this is the fun one. Like, what are you looking for in your applicants? Because I get that question all the time, and I'm sure you do. So so I'll break it down a little bit. What kind of things what are those things you value in applicants, or do you tend to have an affinity for it when you're screening applications?
I would say we look for how students like to present themselves. What do they prioritize in their past experiences, and how do those fit in with our mission? I've heard it said, and quite right too, that there's more that medical schools have in common than they have to distinguish themselves. All medical schools are going to look and be sure that they feel new students are going to be strong enough academically to handle the curriculum. We are in the process of re-examining the way we look at the MCAT, but we have never had an MCAT cutoff. And the MCAT is just another data point for us to indicate that a student has gathered the important biomedical and science courses and done well in them and is able to handle a standardized test. Once a student sort of passes over the threshold, we say they are academically well qualified, and we don't necessarily put much more emphasis on the MCAT than that. So you are more likely to get into UMass Chan if you have a robust history of service, volunteer work, scholarly work, and even research towards your personal goals and you have a 508 on your MCAT than you do if you have sort of scant or somewhat disjointed history of experiences and a 520 on your MCAT.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you for that's really transparent. I mean, that's what I think people like to hear is that what I kind of take away from that is you're telling students in a sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you want people to pursue things that they're genuinely interested in as an undergraduate or as a graduate student versus trying to fit themselves in a box that you think they're looking for, kind of thing.
Absolutely. I've had applicants who would spend most of their gap year working on improving their MCAT when it already started at a perfectly reasonable number, rather than trying to sort of collate those experiences, take on leadership roles, bring whatever organization they're working to the next level. So we're looking for more than simply participation. We're looking for a long-term commitment to a particular type of activity, and the impact that you made on that organization. So let's say you are working for a community partner that is working on food insecurity. And you started out by volunteering in the food pantry, collecting, distributing, maybe handling some money. And you moved forward towards connecting to a particular area of the community and finding out what these particular needs were. Maybe none of them could make it to your food pantry at this time. So you set up a transportation system, or you set up a community garden that was closer to their neighborhood. So we're looking for students who can look at a problem, think about solutions, and work on implementing those solutions. We know not everyone is going to be the president of every organization that they work with, but there are so many ways you can have an impact.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because I was just going to say, I bet you don't have to be like the president or vice president of the food pantry to be the one initiating these kinds of ideas, or, that you just, those examples, right?
Yeah, it's about impact. And to do that, you need to be able to communicate with people. You need to be able to work in teams, because you don't need everybody to be a leader. You need some people to be good at the money and some people to be good at the communicating and gathering. But to be able to look at a larger picture, help figure out what's needed and help implement it.
Is there something in the application that you find when you're screening that you just find valuable? Is it the way students write, or is there are there certain ways that they describe things that jump up, that bring it to life for you, that bring these activities to life? What do you kind of what engages you, I guess, when you're reading thousands of applications?
We do. It's obviously wonderful if students are particularly talented writers, but we do know that many people would be good physicians while being simply adequate writers. So we try not to de-emphasize an application if it's just written well and it's not, someone who's obviously quite experienced in writing. But what we look at people who demonstrate that their past fits with the mission. And also, we really value experiences that are different. We work very hard to recruit and admit a diverse class. And we mean that racially and ethnically, language of origin, socioeconomic status. So if you're there, I have heard some applicants try to de-emphasize that they moved to New York when they were 16, and then they came to Massachusetts when they were just for college, to try to make their experience seem more like it fits in with what they believe is wanted by a medical school. We want to learn about what was your life like before you moved here, and what was it like when you moved here, because that tells me, we talk about persistence and grit. It is a specific skill that we look for throughout the entire application, and we give it a numeric score. So if one person has had to work harder to get to the same spot, we're interested in hearing about that, because they have demonstrated they have persistence and grit, and they probably learned a lot about life and community and health by the work that they've done. So your own personal story, especially in ways that it's going to be different from other people's personal story, is something that really jumps out for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. And I'd like to emphasize to listeners, I think that like you're talking about persistence and grit and also I'm sure resiliency is something that you value. And there, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why is because medical school's hard. And these are some of the foundational characteristics that help make for successful students when times get tough, or, things don't go the way you thought. And if you have some of these characteristics, like we just mentioned, that's going to hopefully serve you well. Do you agree?
I'll borrow a phrase that from one of my colleagues, that medical school is hard and medical school is for grown-ups. So we are looking for an individual who is mature. Yeah. And one way to show that you're mature is how you've come through challenging experiences in your past, and of many different varieties. We do also look for some experience in healthcare areas. Not everyone will work as a paramedic or an EMT. And not everyone will find paid work in healthcare. Right. And many applicants are asking me, how can I get more shadowing opportunities? How can I get more clinical opportunities? Shadowing opportunities are actually very difficult to get, but volunteer opportunities in healthcare areas are easier. So if you're looking for that experience in healthcare, and it doesn't need to be shadowing in an ear, nose, and throat surgeon's office, that's going to be very hard to land. You can go to an emergency room, to a hospital main entrance, to a nursing home, to a rehab facility, and say, I am a college student, I am going into healthcare, and I would like to know about your volunteer positions. And then we look for a relatively strong experience there, like a good number of hours, so that you can be one-on-one with people who are sick or injured, and care for them in the way that your volunteer experience says you're supposed to. Yeah. We are interested in medical scribing as well. That's another way to get paid work in healthcare.
You have kind of an interesting program in medical scribing.
We do. Yes.
Yeah. I wrote it down here in my notes someplace that, it's through the UMass system, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So some really smart people in admissions and, not to crow too loudly, but the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health, which is my department, created a fellowship mostly for students from disadvantaged backgrounds who want to take a gap year, who need paid work during their gap year, and would like to learn about medical scribing. So you come into the program, you are trained as a medical scribe, and you are given scribe positions in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health. It's only 16 hours a week of work, because you want to have enough time to, if there's other areas of your application that you're working on, such as your service or volunteer work, or if you're taking your MCAT during that gap year, it gives you time to study. And in addition to just providing you with the scribe experience, you have a mentor and some academic support. So someone who works with you on how to put together your best possible application, make sure you're aware of all the timelines. How are you preparing for your MCAT, and what do you need to do to make that really strong?
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. I even sent the link to my dean. I'm like, this is so cool. Like she's like, you need to read this. God, I found there's an article I found. I'll put a link to it in the show description about it. And there's like a little SoundCloud interview thing too, and in the link. So it really goes into detail about it. It's very, very forward thinking. And I thought it was very well done. So I'm glad you touched on the medically related experiences. It sounds like a must-have, but it can look and comes in different shades. Right. I
think experience with healthcare in some way is a must-have.
Yeah.
Partly because you need to know that you really want to do this. If you start doing transportation volunteer work in the ER and you're moving patients around and you're like, I just don't like being around sick people.
Yeah.
You might not have known that before. And it's a great opportunity for you to make a change in your pathway. So for us to know that you have a good sense of what you're getting into and that you're passionate about it, and to get some experience in the healthcare system.
Yep.
That is a must-have.
This just goes along with a continuing theme of other admissions deans and directors whom I've met with on this show. And it just continues. You just keep continuing to reinforce what I think if people have been listening for a while, similar themes that this is not a checkbox, but it's a help the student, figure out like, do they really want to do this? Do you want to be around sick people? And some of the, I don't know if unglamorous is a word, but I'm going to use it anyway. One of the unglamorous sides of medicine,
definitely.
Yeah.
Patients are often in a state of crisis. And so sometimes their behavior can be difficult. They can be going through some of the most difficult parts of their lives. And so they can be grumpy and they can yell, or if they are sick, they're scared. And, sometimes being around illness and patients having symptoms is not easy, and blood and all that. So it's great to learn if this is really because there are many people who go into medicine because they want to serve others and they like science, which is great. But there are actually other ways to do that too, if being around the sick and injured is not your thing. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Last couple questions here. From the homework that I did, you are requiring Preview, the situational judgment test this year. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And is it for all applicants, or is it just for those invited for interview? How is that going to work for you this year?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. This is going to be our first year requiring Preview. I think many of our listeners will be more familiar with Casper than Preview because it's been around for a while. But both Casper and Preview are two situational judgment tests, as you said. The job of which is to, just like the terminology, to learn how you think in challenging situations. There is no requirement to know any science or any other topic in order to take them. I would say the best way to prepare for Preview is to go to the AAMC's website. They have an excellent page on Preview. There's practice tests. You learn what it looks like when you log in, so that when you actually sit down to take the exam, you feel very comfortable with the portal, the computer interface, and you know what's expected of you. Beyond that, you don't need to prepare. It's not like the MCAT where you need to study, or your interview where you need to have interview responses prepared. We get to learn a bit about applicants' service orientation, a bit about how they communicate, their ethical priorities, how they handle challenging situations. The way Preview does it is you will get a very short paragraph of some challenging situation. For example, you are in a busy season with your courses, and there's a project and it's due tomorrow, and you have not really started it yet because you were so busy with other things. And the professor's been saying twice a week, if you have trouble with this, you come to me on my office hours or reach out to me. And you've been a little bit avoidant because it was a challenging project. And so now it's the night before, and how are you going to manage this? And then you will be given like 4 or 5 possible ways of managing it. You do not need to write in the answers. You read the answer and you say, that's a terrible idea. I'm definitely not going to do that. Or you say, that's okay. And then this one's great. And so you give every response a score from very bad to very good. And then your responses are compared to quote experts, which are really usually just, I'm a subject matter expert for the Preview exam.
Yeah,
so
I was too. Yeah.
I take several of these, and they just put all of our answers together and compare them. You're given a score from 1 to 9. And then the big question is, how do we use this? I would say there are schools who don't use it. There are schools who use it to screen applications initially, and there are some that use to decide if you're going to have an interview. We have not made a firm decision yet on how we're going to use it. So our first year, we are going to simply consider it as an additional data point. Preview has some very strong psychometric data to support its being a high quality test. And students don't think it's particularly difficult to take. So it's good in that sense, but we don't necessarily know if you have a Preview score of 6, that means you're very likely to make good management decisions in your third year. That's the kind of information we don't yet have available yet. And in the absence of that, we want to have more time with it. So you will need to have a Preview score in order for your application to be considered. at all.
Yep.
So until we get your preview score, we're not reading your application. So it's really important to see what the schedule is.
Yep. Well, I'll put links to the preview resources that you mentioned in the show description. So again, another quick way for people to jump in there and read a little more and see the scheduling for it if they haven't already looked at that when the tests are coming up, those administrations. Last little question about admissions related things. Do you have any general advice for prospective applicants that to help them polish up their application to get it ready to go for this coming year?
Sure. A few points I think have sort of emerged as really important. The first one, and this is not fair, but it's reality, is apply early. Mm-hmm. If you are not going to have MCAT scores, preview scores, and all your letters in until towards the end of the application cycle, you may consider taking an additional gap year. We have about 5,000 applications per year, and we approved or wanted to interview about 2,000 of those because they were that strong, but we ran out of slots before we got through half that. So that means we had many highly qualified applicants who we had to actually reject, even though we would have loved to have known more about them. So timing is very important. Be able to have all your requirements in as early in the application cycle as possible. Also, have people read your responses. And those of you who are at schools with really strong pre-health programs and you have a pre-health advisor, I'm sure your advisor gives you great ideas about who should read it, and maybe they read it. But it's very important to have all your spelling, your punctuation, your syntax checked. So, this is a job application. And so you want to project your best self.
Yep.
So no grammatical things. When you interview, try to make sure that you present yourself as professionally as possible. I've been using this example. Unfortunately, we do all of our interviews via Zoom. And there's this one very strong applicant who just had an unmade bed in his background during his Zoom. So rather than just tidying up his space or moving his laptop to another room, he just sort of sat down and started his interviews. And it does make someone wonder if an applicant understands what you need to do to be in front of patients. So that's one example. Yeah. Present yourself as professionally as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of takes us to the interview day piece. So your school has been doing the MMIs, the multi-mini interviews, and has been virtual from my understanding. Do you intend to stay that way next year going forward, or do you have, or is it year to year?
We will. We're going to remain virtual. We made that decision to decrease the barriers for applicants and decrease the cost of the overall application. None of us enjoy meeting people via Zoom. We'd much rather sit in a room together and share the air, but we're saving these people multiple airline tickets and
gobs of money,
much time away. Yeah. So we're going to stay virtual.
Yeah. What's your MMI day like?
We have a check-in, and then we have a welcoming / orientation to the center, which we're probably going to beef up a bit, especially now with our new regional campus, to be a little bit longer and perhaps include a little bit more information. And we have 8 stations. The applicant goes to the first station. They have 2 minutes to read the scenario and make notes and prepare in any way they like, and then 6 minutes to discuss. And we prefer a discussion rather than a presentation, but we know timing is not always perfect. And then at the end of 8 minutes, you're whisked away to your next station, and you do 8 right in a row. And then we meet again at the end and talk and address questions.
How does your committee then evaluate the MMI scores or the information they get back, and share with people, like, what's the advantage of the MMI for you guys that you clearly you like it and you find it very helpful?
Yeah. Having more people interact with you reduces the chance of bias better. So if one of the interviewers is having a really bad day and you remind them of their second grade teacher who tortured them, that's not going to be your entire interview experience or even 50% of it. It's just going to be one station. So we also like to get perspectives from a broad range of people. We have students, staff, faculty, all interview. And so a student may have a different take than a faculty member. We get to cover quite a lot of interesting material, but with the different topics. There are advantages of the traditional interview is you can really drill down, you can make a longer term connection, and then sometimes you can ask an applicant to talk more about one of the strong features of their application. So they really get to show off. And we do miss out on that. But for us, the pros outweigh the cons.
Yeah. What's your advice for preparing for this type of setting?
So I think you can't prepare necessarily for all the scenarios, although there are, as you know, a zillion MMI scenarios available online. So it's not a bad idea to look at what people consider to be the most common ones. But it is important to prepare for the process, to make sure that your technology is in good shape, to make sure that your space looks good and that you are dressed professionally, and to practice reading something and after a brief period of time being able to speak about it. We're very clear that you do not need to have any pre-existing knowledge to do well on the MMI, but that's not the same as preparing for it. So again, the AAMC has some great resources for preparing for your MMI. For the really adventurous and conscientious student, you can record yourself. And I know that that's very painful for many of us, but it's one of the only ways you get to see how you tend to always turn your head to the left, or that you say a lot. I just said So preparing by recording yourself, or preparing if you are working with a friend who's also applying to medical school, you can do 3 for them and they do 3 for you. Sometimes practicing doing them in a row and putting yourself under a little of time pressure is useful.
Yeah, maybe getting that kind of mental stopwatch going so you remember how, and it's almost like how students prepared for the MCAT. There's a time length, there's a duration of each section, and you really worked on how do I get all these questions done within this time frame. So you worked on the stamina and the pacing. It's the same kind of translation to MMI, where you're in a time situation where you have to know, all right, I need to start wrapping it up, or,
Exactly. So, except it's a totally different part of your brain, right? Yeah. Because you're like, am I making a connection? I've been asked, can you really make a connection with someone in only 6 minutes? And the question is absolutely. We make some fantastic connections with these applicants. It's an important skill in medicine. You're going to walk in to see a patient. You've never met them before. And it's your job to put them at ease, to make them know that their comfort and their health and well-being is really important to you, just like right in that opening sentence. Yeah. So looking people in the eyes, even if you might be a little bit more of a quiet or introspective person, varied facial expressions, variation in your tone, helps you to come across as someone who makes connections well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great tips. Those are really, really, really great tips. A couple of things that I meant to ask you when we were in the admissions piece of our conversation, but I want to go back to, because it just kind of came up. It's not uncommon for students to have to retake the MCAT. How do you, what's your perspective? What are your thoughts on taking the MCAT more than once? Big deal? Not a big deal?
For us, it's not a particularly big deal. We take it in the context that it is. If you took the MCAT once and you were underprepared, or there was something going on that affected your function that day, and then you make the change that needs to be made and are able to improve your score with the next attempt, it's a little bit more worrisome if someone takes it again and has the same score or nearly the same score. And not necessarily because of the score itself, but because they weren't able to figure out or get someone to work with them to figure out what they needed to do to improve their score. So it speaks more to us of the process. And if you have an MMI score that's on the low side, I think it's better to take it again and try to get a stronger score. Than I've seen people with a 511, 515 take it again, and we're like, really? Why did you do that? Yeah. You could have spent that time doing something much more fun. Yeah. And so we don't consider that person is academically less qualified because they had to take the MMI twice, but we do look for an increased trajectory.
Yeah. What about,
thank you.
Yeah. And then similarly, reapplicants to medical school. That's not uncommon to see people reapplying to medical school. And the data I see kind of year after year is about 25% of the application pool are comprised of reapplicants. So at UMass, what are your thoughts on seeing people that have reapplied to you that are reapplying?
Yeah, we've accepted many reapplicants each year. And again, we have an opportunity on our secondary to say, what should we know about you that's not in your application, or what have you been doing with your gap year? That's a good question to talk about how you have strengthened your application since the last time. Not everyone has to know how to do it perfectly the first time around. And that makes a lot of sense. If, however, you're submitting a fairly similar application and you haven't done more experiences, or you haven't retaken a course that needed to be retaken, or your interview, which was problematic the first time, is somewhat the same, then that is more of an issue and you're much less likely to get admitted.
Yeah.
So we do look at what happened with us the last time around, what was the problem, and specifically how have you changed that?
Yep. So we can go, if you applied to us previously, we can go back and see the previous application. I've had some applicants ask that. And unless it's a new school on your list, they won't be able to access your previous application. But if you're reapplying to the same school or schools again, we can access in our data, our archives, and pull things up and look back at all kinds of data, for the interview feedback, if they interviewed, and personal statements and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, make sure you change things up.
Yeah.
How many days a week do you interview?
It varies, maximum 3 days a week, but it's more typical 2 days a week because everything else that's going on during the cycle.
Yeah. And then, so after you've done all these interview days, 2, sometimes 3 days a week, what are some of your general tips? You said earlier, make sure their background's kind of cleaned up and that kind of thing. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd pass along?
My biggest one is prepare.
Yeah.
You don't have to study anything, but you do have to prepare. I've said to applicants, when I'm applying for a new job, I prepare for months in advance. I learn about the people who are going to be interviewing me, what might they be interested in, and I write down some of the most likely questions, and then I write answers to them as if I'm speaking. And not because I plan to read those answers, but because the process of writing it out helps me feel comfortable speaking it during an interview, and know what it is that you're naturally good at, know what you need to improve. So if making that visual impression is like not your strong suit because you don't love staring into screens, practice staring into screens and have people watch you. Use the resources, read some of the available questions, practice.
Yeah. So after the interview day, admissions committee rolls around. Do you do acceptances in a rolling fashion, or is it just a couple times a year? How does that work?
We have previously done them rolling, and we're moving towards a sort of 3 times during the year.
Okay.
So that's actually to the benefit of someone who applies later.
Yeah.
Because if it's rolling, you're going to fill your class from the first 600 people that you interview. And then there's many good people that you're missing.
Mm-hmm. And then if somebody's not accepted right away and they are on your wait list, can you talk a little bit about how your alternate list / wait list works? How does that function?
Yes, it's difficult news to get. And it involves a lot of waiting, not to be coy.
More waiting.
We send out the number of offers that we need to send, and we don't take off the wait list, obviously, until the total number of offers is dropped below the number of people we want to admit. That rarely happens before the end of April. Mm-hmm. So as anyone who's applying right now knows, you can reduce your list of acceptances to 3. I believe today is the deadline for that. And then because of where April 30th falls, you have until May 1st this year to reduce that to 1. So that's the time when we usually see our number shrinking. And I'm sure it's the same with other schools. So you're unlikely to get pulled off the wait list before May. So that's frustrating, but we do definitely take people off the wait list every year. As I mentioned before, we had those applicants we interviewed later on after we were already full and we're hitting our heads against the wall saying, oh, we would love to have this person. So they're sitting at the very top of our wait list. So it's when you receive an offer of a wait list, it means we believe you are absolutely qualified to be a medical student and you would be really successful. So it is a very, very positive evaluation of your candidacy. And it's just a numbers game from that point.
Yeah. Do you want to hear from people that are interested in your school, like letters of interest or letters of intent or updates? Is that how do you receive those kind of correspondences, or do you?
We do. There's absolutely no communication that any applicant or student would ever send me that we would not receive and respond to. They don't make a difference in where you sit on the wait list.
Okay.
But so we don't necessarily encourage them. We do get updates. If you've had something really important happen in your career, your academic career, and you have not heard yet whether you've been given an offer, rejection, or waitlist, then please do send that to us, because that may mean we have not yet discussed you in the admissions committee. And an update like my paper got published, or I got asked to speak at this organization, or I'm doing a poster, that will absolutely make a difference in your candidacy. Reiteration of interest we always want to respond to it. We don't ever want to appear ungracious about communication, because we love hearing from our applicants, but it won't affect the outcome.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. So there may not be pressure there for somebody to feel like they need to be demonstrating their undying love for
Exactly.
UMass Chan. If it's like, it's not going to affect, the way the things kind of roll out, then it's okay. But unless there's some significance during the application cycle that you need to share, then that'll be received. You're a relatively new dean of admissions. What have you found most fulfilling in your new role over the last year or so?
Unsurprisingly, it has been talking with applicants. We had our first in-person second look event since before the pandemic. We had a new format. We had some offerings and programming on diversity and inclusion, and it was absolutely fantastic. We were over the moon excited to meet these people that we had read about and interviewed and learned about. The enthusiasm and excitement in the room was palpable. We had 170 people come in person to our campus. We were overwhelmed in a good way.
Yeah.
So hearing about people thinking in an excited way about their future and their goals, especially if they're like, if I wish only this would happen. And they say, you could do that when you come to UMass Chan, and they're so excited. Yeah, unsurprisingly, that's been the most fulfilling part. Also great. Making a lot of progress on strategies for improving the diversity of our class and seeing some of them come to fruition is very satisfying.
Oh, that's wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to mention today for our listeners about your school, just to kind of put a cherry on top? We are every bit as excited as I sound on this podcast. Our students are happy where they are, and we could tell by the huge number of volunteers that we had from the first year class to work on the second look event and meet new applicants. Our students are happy. They like where they are. Our offerings are only growing, and it's a very exciting and fulfilling place to be. Yeah, sounds like an exciting time. A lot going on there, and a lot of forward thinking and intentional work being done in your curriculum and programming around the school.
Very much so.
Tracy, this has been a really enjoyable talk. There's so many things I want to borrow ideas and stuff. I wish I was in charge of everything here, but no, really a lot of wonderful, like I said, really some really cool activities and programming going on at your school. I thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day to come spend a little time with us.
It was absolutely delightful. Thank you so much. I'm very excited about what I do. It's a pleasure really to talk about it.
Yeah, well, it's very clear. So thanks again, and I'll see you around.
Great. Bye.
Bye.